When the head of the FBI looks a member of Congress in the eye and says, "You're failing, not me," that's not leadership. It's a warning. Because when the people sworn to protect justice start mocking oversight, it's not just a clash in a hearing room. It's the sound of democracy cracking from the inside. What you're about to hear isn't politics. It's a moment that exposed how the system meant to serve the public may now be serving power itself. Representative Madeleine wasn't shouting. She didn't need to. Every word she spoke carried the weight of something bigger than partisanship. Since taking office, she said, the administration has been on a revenge tour, targeting critics, cutting off institutions, even using agencies to silence dissent.
President Trump has been on a revenge tour. He has targeted individuals, universities, law firms, with executive orders to cut them out or to make them come under his will. He has used ICE to disappear U.S. citizens without due process, and he's fully ignored a unanimous Supreme Court order, and then over the weekend wasn't sure if he was obligated to uphold the Constitution of the United States. In your book, your recent book, Government Gangsters, you include an appendix with a list of names that people have referred to as an enemies list. Now, I know you will claim it's just an appendix, not an enemies list. So let's focus on how the president sees it, on what the president calls it. And you proudly display his quote on the front cover of your book. The president calls this a brilliant roadmap, a blueprint. And I have not even raised your storied children's book, The Plot Against the King. It concerns me how many people from this blueprint have been targeted with executive orders and FBI investigations. The FBI cannot be weaponized, and under your leadership, it has been nothing but a weapon alongside the president to go after the president's perceived opponents, to stifle dissent and free speech. A few weeks ago, as we saw through a social media post that you quickly deleted, the FBI arrested a judge in Wisconsin for correctly asking ICE officials if they had a judicial warrant instead of an administrative warrant, which they did not have. Despite this judge following the law, on the morning of April the 25th, the FBI arrested the judge in an escalation of the weaponization of the FBI under your leadership. Let me be clear. A functioning democracy does not lock up judges. I am gravely concerned about the utter lack of independence of the FBI and its weaponization under your leadership. I am concerned that the president is using this book, your book, as a blueprint, as he has said. It's a blueprint for revenge. And I am concerned that your eagerness, a childlike giddiness to carry out the president's revenge tour, you've shown yourself to be unserious in your statements before you were sworn in and some after. You've shown yourself unfit to lead this important agency. I was an impeachment manager for President Trump's second impeachment. It was a sad, solemn duty. And so I wanted to ask you about that. Mr. Patel, as you and the president continue to weaponize and investigate his perceived enemies, as you follow this blueprint, when can I, a former impeachment manager, expect the FBI at my door?
Ma'am, you want to know who was targeted by a weaponized FBI? Me. You want to know how and why?
Well,
you want to know what I'm doing to fix it?
That. Let me move on.
Well, you should read the book because there's no enemies
So-
list on that book.
So
There are
you-
people that violated their constitutional obligations and their duties to the American people.
That's good. You
And they
gave
were
them due
rightly
process.
called out.
I'm
And you
changing
should
topics.
give that book to every one of your constituents so they can
changing
read
topics.
about it.
I won't be doing that.
That's their loss.
During your Senate confirmation hearings, you repeatedly denied having any involvement as a private citizen in the firing of FBI officials who engaged in the prosecution against January 6 insurrectionists, the violent rioters who beat and killed Capitol police officers, and whom you referred to as political prisoners. Since then, multiple whistleblowers have come forward, and we know that you likely committed perjury. At the same hearing, you claimed you were not familiar with Stu Peters, an anti-Semitic Holocaust denier, despite the fact that you appeared on Mr. Peters' podcast 8 separate times. 8 times, and you claimed not to recall. Mr. Patel, my second question is, should we worry more about your memory or your veracity?
We should worry more about your lack of candor. You're accusing me of committing
veracity?
perjury. Tell the American
You didn't
people how
know-
I broke the law and committed a felony.
You did
Have the
when-
audacity to actually put the
all right,
facts
then
forward
the answer is
instead of
both.
lying for political banter so you can have a 20-second
answer
donation hit.
The answer is both. I believe that the
The
men and
answer is
women of
you're
the,
failing, not
I
me.
reclaim my time.
Go ahead.
Mr. Patel, I believe that the members of the FBI, and I know many of them, many retired, 38,000 people, as you say, it's a little less than that now, deserve the very best, deserve extraordinary independence, deserve freedom from the fears of being investigated, the freedom of coming forward to make sure they're doing their job. And I'll end with this, that I think it's interesting that in your proposal today, you find yourself at a gulf of difference between you and the president. I wonder how you will resolve that. Will you go to the president and say, we need $11.2 billion, not what you cut out of here? You're asking for more than $1 billion than the president's request. Are you going to go to the president and straighten out that gulf?
I'll do what I've always done and represent the American people, defend this country, and make sure the Constitution is always upheld and the FBI is never weaponized. Maybe you should do the same.
So you agree with the president when he says he doesn't know if he should uphold his constitutional duty?
If you want to just keep putting words in my mouth, the TV cameras are outside.
I thank you. I yield back. Again, this is an unserious moment, sadly, for the FBI. I yield back.
More so for you.
Mr. Strong.
Across from her, FBI Director Kash Patel sat stone-faced, his hand gripping the microphone. She wasn't talking about theories. She was describing a pattern that millions of Americans have felt but never heard spoken so directly. What happens when law enforcement becomes a political tool that Dean's voice didn't shake when she laid it out? You included an appendix in your book, she said, a list that's being called an enemies list. The room went still. Patel's book, Government Gangsters, had become a talking point across Washington, a manifesto praised by those who believed in purging so-called disloyal officials. You call it an appendix, Dean continued, but the president calls it a blueprint. And now, people from that list are being targeted through executive orders, through investigations, through intimidation. For a second, Patel didn't answer. He adjusted his mic, leaned forward, and forced a grin. You should read the book, he said. There's no enemies list. Just people who violated their duty to the American people. He even added, you should give it to every one of your constituents. Dean didn't flinch. I won't be doing that. Patel smirked. That's their loss. The tension wasn't just personal, it was ideological. Two versions of government clashing in real time. One demanding accountability, the other demanding loyalty. But that wasn't the moment that broke the room. It came later, when Dean brought up something that crossed every line of democratic boundaries, a judge's arrest. A few weeks ago, she said, the FBI arrested a judge in Wisconsin. His only crime was asking ICE officers if they had a judicial warrant instead of an administrative one, which they didn't. In other words, the judge followed the law. And yet, the FBI showed up at his door. Dean's words cut through the noise. A functioning democracy does not lock up judges. The director shifted in his seat. He didn't deny it. He didn't condemn it. He just sat there, silent. That silence said more than any denial could. It showed what happens when the most powerful investigative body in America stops fearing the limits of its own authority. Dean pressed on. She mentioned Patel's televised appearances, his public attacks on investigators, his tendency to call critics political prisoners. She referenced whistleblowers who claimed he'd been less than truthful under oath, reminding him that perjury, lying in testimony, is a felony. You claim not to know Stu Peters, she said, a known extremist and Holocaust denier. But records show you appeared on his show 8 separate times. So should we worry more about your memory or your honesty? Patel leaned forward again, face tightening. You are accusing me of committing a felony, he snapped. Tell the American people how I broke the law instead of lying for a 20-second donation hit. Dean's answer was ice cold. Both, she said. Your memory and your honesty. That's when Patel lost his composure. You're failing, not me, he said, his voice sharp, almost triumphant. It wasn't a defense. It was a declaration. For a man running the most powerful law enforcement agency in the country, it was a stunning moment. The director of the FBI telling Congress that they are the ones failing the country, not him. You could hear the disbelief ripple through the room. Dean sat back, almost expressionless, as if realizing she'd just witnessed exactly what she came to expose. Because this wasn't just about a bad exchange or bruised egos. It was about power, who has it, who keeps it, and who's supposed to keep it in check. When a director stops seeing oversight as a constitutional duty and starts treating it like a political attack, that's when democracy begins to slide. Dean saw it. She framed her questioning not as an attack on one man, but as a defense of an institution that can't afford to lose its credibility. She said, "I know many members of the FBI, retired and active. They deserve independence. They deserve to do their jobs without fear of political reprisal." And then she made the point that might have been missed by casual viewers, the one buried beneath the sound bites and viral clips. It was about money. "You're asking for more than $1 billion beyond the president's proposal," she said. "Will you go to the president and resolve that gulf?" It sounded technical, but it wasn't. Budgets are values on paper. They reveal what an agency truly prioritizes. If a director's funding depends on loyalty to political leaders, the independence of the institution collapses in slow motion. When you reward obedience with money and punish dissent with cuts, you turn public service into personal service. Patel replied with a line that sounded rehearsed. "I'll defend the Constitution, represent the American people, and make sure the FBI is never weaponized." But his earlier defiance made those words ring hollow. You can't promise independence right after you attack oversight. The message was clear. In this new era, accountability itself is treated like the enemy. Dean's final remarks pulled the focus back to what's at stake. Not for her, not for Patel, but for everyone watching. A director who writes a blueprint for revenge, a president who praises it, and an FBI that acts on it. That's not independence. That's erosion. Her time expired, but the moment lingered. Because whether you agreed with her politics or not, her warning echoed a truth that transcends party. Once the rule of law bends to personality, it never bends back on its own. That's the real story. Not the shouting, not the viral clip, but the deeper shift happening inside institutions we depend on to stay impartial. The erosion doesn't start with tanks in the streets. It starts with tone, with who gets promoted, who gets punished, and what kind of loyalty is rewarded behind closed doors. When leadership praises aggression instead of accountability, agents start self-censoring. Prosecutors start second-guessing. Whistleblowers stop coming forward. And the culture changes quietly, until the public wakes up one day and realizes that the agency they trusted to enforce the law now enforces obedience. This is how institutional decay works. It's slow. It's bureaucratic. It hides behind policy memos, funding requests, and the language of security. You don't see it happening until it's too late. That's why hearings like this matter. They aren't theater. Their documentation. Every question asked, every evasive answer given, becomes part of the public record. Oversight isn't just about catching lies. It's about making sure the truth doesn't vanish behind classified seals or deleted files. When Patel snapped back, when he accused a member of Congress of lying for donations, what he really did was reveal something most officials never say out loud: contempt for scrutiny. That's why Dean's calm persistence hit so hard. She didn't yell. She didn't grandstand. She let the silence do the work. And that silence, those few seconds when the director had no defense, was louder than any viral soundbite that I in moments like that. The story isn't just about one man. It's about what happens when institutions stop fearing accountability and start fearing criticism. Dean's closing warning said it best. A functioning democracy does not lock up judges. It doesn't silence dissent. It doesn't use power to settle scores. And when it does, it's up to ordinary citizens to notice before the system normalizes it. That's why this exchange matters more than it might seem. It's not a one-day headline. It's a window into a deeper struggle over the soul of American law enforcement. On one side, the belief that justice must answer to politics. On the other, the belief that justice must answer only to law. And the scary part? Most people don't realize how thin that line really is. The next time you hear a government official talk about fixing the FBI, ask what they really mean. Are they talking about reform or control? Are they trying to make the Bureau better or make it obey? Because in moments like this, when the director tells Congress, "You're failing, not me," you can see the shift happening in real time. That's not confidence. That's contempt dressed as strength. Dean understood the stakes. She made that hearing more than a policy debate. She made it a record of resistance. For her, it wasn't about headlines or donations. It was about drawing a line between oversight and obedience, between law and loyalty. And for everyone watching, it was a reminder that power unchecked doesn't just corrupt. It redefines what justice even means. If this story made you think, if it made you question who really holds power and who's keeping them in check, don't let it fade away after the scroll. Because the truth is, these hearings, these confrontations, they're not just about politics. They're about the slow dismantling or defense of the systems that protect every one of us.so. If you care about accountability, if you believe institutions should serve people and not power, share this video. Talk about it. Ask questions. Because silence helps the powerful, not the public. And if you want to keep uncovering how these moments shape the bigger story, subscribe, like, and stay tuned. The next time someone in power says, "You're failing, not me," you'll know exactly what it means.